The Marines are a colossal organization, and as the single greatest power in all of the One Piece planet, working your way up the ranks is not easy. Unless, of course, you have magical fruit power, then it becomes significantly easier. This is a concept I refer to as magical fruit nepotism. But for all of us regular fictional people, this is every Marine rank explained. And immediately after enlisting, a Marine is granted the rank of Chore Boy, with the only two canon Chore Boys we've seen being Kobe and Helmeppo after the events of Shellstown. As Chore Boy, your main responsibilities include scrubbing floors, scrubbing uniforms, scrubbing swords. Basically, if something needs a scrubbing, then them Chore Boys are getting a summoning. I guess if you want to look at it more positively, then Chore Boy is the 19th highest rank that you can hold within the Marines. But also, it's a bit of an exclusive rank because not all Marines are allowed to have it. And assumedly, this is due to in-world child labor laws because you can only be a Chore Boy if you enlist as a child, which I think makes sense. If you enlisted as an adult, then you'd be some sort of chore man. But as an adult, your first stop on the fun train that is military service is what I like to call the Seaman Trilogy, which begins with the first installment of Seaman Recruit. Longtime channel watchers are probably expecting me to make a seaman joke here, and don't worry, it's coming. But this is not a rank exclusive to One Piece, fiction in general, or even the real-life Navy, because all of us at one stage were seamen. But the two most prominent in the One Piece world are Django and Full Body. When Django enlisted due to his adultness, this was his starting point, and Full Body was demoted to Seaman Recruit all the way from Lieutenant, so this is his second go at this trilogy. But once you've proved yourself as mildly adequate, you move on to Seaman Apprentice. And despite this rank existing, there is not a single known Marine we've met in the series who has held it, so instead, he is a dog. But capping off this extraordinary opening trilogy is Seaman First Class. It's another fairly obscure rank for One Piece. We know of exactly one character who is deemed worthy of being First Class, and he may or may not even still be a character. His name is Lines, and this was the guy who Gin shot and potentially murdered a Baratier. In the anime, you do see him crawling away afterwards, but in the manga, you do not see that. You see nothing at all. And in fact, legend has it that his body is still lying there at the Baratier entrance, decaying away to simultaneously greet and warn future customers. But if you manage to survive your time as Seaman First Class, then you are gifted with a brand new trilogy. You then get to graduate into the Petty Officer saga, featuring Petty Officer, Chief Petty Officer, and Master Chief Petty Officer. The first of which we have no examples of, so here's the dog again, but this time he's a bit more fancy. But for Chief Petty Officer, we have Asahija, a Marine who had his shadow stolen by the fiendish Gecko Moria, and his name literally means it's morning, which is one of the many examples of Oda naming his characters after the specific environments, times, or actions being committed by said characters in the one and only time they're shown. Meanwhile, Master Chief Petty Officer is the rank Tashiki held when we first met her, so this is where the Marines start being given a small taste of command power. And then, if you don't completely mess that up, then we are moving on upwards to Warrant Officer. And One Piece doesn't have any examples of these either, and I'm tired of using the dog, so I asked all of you to give me your original character warrant officer for one of my artists to draw, and we received this. His name is Mario. He always has a new conspiration theory that he believes religiously. He wears a red hat with his initial on it, so thank you very much for that completely original character idea. But I should say that even though we don't know any of them, warrant officer marks a big step up. The Marine organization is divided into two broad categories. You have the Infantry and Sailor Division, and above them are the Commissioned Officers, with Warrant Officer being the first of those ranks. And a step above that is Ensign, with notable ensigns including Marco, the Marine who was very, very upset that his squad were failing to capture the Straw Hats while they waited for Vivi's response at the end of Alabasta. He seems like a very minor character, and well, he is, but even then Oda remembered to include an image of Marco in his rookie days on the Film Z color spread. Should you be deemed worthy from there, a Marine will enter the Lieutenant Trilogy, which commences with Lieutenant Junior Grade. And Rokaku, one of the first Marines we met in the series, holds this rank. Meanwhile, Full Body was a full lieutenant until he decided to be a bit of a prick and got himself demoted. However, character development, because Full Body post-time skip has worked his way back up and even further, now holding the rank of Lieutenant Commander along with Django and even Helmeppo, a trio of minor antagonists who have gone on their own respective redemption journeys. However, Lieutenant Commander still pales in comparison to the Commander, also known as just Commander, and quite famously Ripper is a commander, who became the leader of the Shellstown base after Axan Morgan was dethroned due to a series of events all revolving around a small girl and her rice balls. It's kind of like the domino effect meme. Rika makes a rice ball, which then ultimately leads to the toppling of a Marine dictator. We do have quite a few significantly more famous commanders though. Don Quixote Rocinante was a Marine commander, even during his time as a fake pirate, although sadly this fake pirate was still shot with a real bullet. In more recent times, Hibari holds this rank, and the non-canon fan favorite Condoriano is also a commander. That, or he was a member of the Straw Hats, I keep forgetting which. But from commander, we move to captain, and mate, we have lots of these. Captains play fairly integral roles in One Piece because this is the first big boy marine position. When the bust call on any Sobi occurred, only marines of captain rank and above were allowed to fight, with many of them capable of some pretty serious power, such as Shu, who destroyed one of Zoro's swords. Sharinguru and Very Good were also captains in any Sobi. One can become wheels and the other can become balls. It's all very fun. And as the title implies, captains are also often granted their own ships and a whole gaggle of marines to command. This is the rank that Kobe and Toshigi currently hold, so you'd think the standards for this position would be pretty damn high. However, there's a however, because there's a big discrepancy with the exact requirements for the captain position. For example, Nezumi from the Arlong arc was a captain, and in retrospect, it seems like a questionably high position for him, considering that he has 0 combat ability. Or maybe it's just easier to get promoted in East Blue. And while we're here, Captain Nezumi is not to be confused with Captain Rattel, who is also a rat-based marine captain who literally has the word rat in his name, because Nezumi is Japanese for rat, and rat is rat for rat. That aside, these are two completely different characters. Again, same rank, similar design, and practically the same name, but different characters. Maybe they're related, or maybe I'm just being rat racist. I don't know. So let's move on. Prove yourself as captain and you'll be upgraded to Commodore. And this is where things get fun, because the Commodore rank is where Marines start to gain very liberal uniform privileges. Most Marines below this rank have a very standard look. You do have your odd characters who stand out here and there, but along with the Commodore rank, you are granted a license to fashion. You have Commodore Brand New, who rocks up to work in a very fashionable black and blue button-up, a very lovely pattern that says, "I take my job seriously, but I'm still a fun guy on the weekends," when I get them, which isn't often. Behind him on the runway, we've got Commodore Pudding Pudding, who wears an augmented marine coat with a neon green cravat, and who collects ponytails on his head. I say collects because when he was younger, he only had one. And then, of course, the Commodore you've all been waiting, for. It's Yarisugi of the G5 base. And there is no word in English, Elvish, Entish, or the tongues of men that can describe his sense of fashion. From the bottom up, we have golden knee-high metal greaves, aggressively guiding the eye to the bulge residing in Yarisugi's pink short shorts, contrasting against a spotted black and white top with a fur coat, a bow tie, and 3 star buttons because why not? He also once tried to kill Carabo by burning him at the stake like some sort of swamp witch. Commodores also start to be given very diverse assignments based on what it is they excel at. Commodore Brand New, for example, excels at paperwork, so his entire job is assigning and distributing bounty posters. Strength is not necessarily a factor to achieve this rank. It seems like you can be placed here if you're just really good at administration. But with those skills, this is as high as you can go. Because we're going to start using the A word now. Here we have the Admiral tier starting at the bottom with the Rear Admirals, one of which is Hina, and she even has her own subdivision within the Marines known as the Black Cage Corps, a sector of special forces under her control. What special things do they do? Don't know, it's never been explained. The 2 very recent Rear Admirals we met would be Prince Gru and Kujaku, which I find surprising because they seem incredibly young to have ranks this high up, and also Prince Gru has this ongoing rivalry with Kobe, which is a bit odd because he is 2 ranks higher than him. However, there's good reason for this, and I'll say the reason in a bit. But for now, it's also suspected that mysterious fan favorite Bogard is a Rear Admiral, mostly because he spends all of his time in the story standing behind Garp, hence the rear part. Explaining the jokes always makes them funnier, and also it's not even my joke. I quite blatantly stole it from a comment in my Bogard video. Meanwhile, it's difficult to say what his status is now, but one Diaz Drake was a Rear Admiral before he went undercover as a dinosaur pirate, and he's also captain of Sword, which is a whole thing of its own. Sword are a secret special force unit thing of the Marines who have resigned from the traditional command structure. So they're sort of like Schrodinger's Marines. They're both Marines and also not Marines at the same time. Traditional command turns a blind eye and allows Sword to just sort of do their own thing, which often means the freedom to act without bureaucracy. And if they mess up, then the Marines can officially say, "Oh, well, they weren't part of us. I had no idea this was going on. They were part of a different thing, being told what to do by a dinosaur." But this is also why Prince Gru has a rivalry with Kobe, because even though one is a Rear Admiral and one is a captain, both have effectively resigned those ranks and are equals within the Sword hierarchy. Officially speaking, even a chore boy holds a higher rank than any Sword member. But moving on, the 3rd highest rank within the Marines is of course the Vice Admiral. But despite being ever so high up and ever so difficult to attain, weirdly enough, it's also the most common Marine rank we encounter in the series. Not counting Marines who were promoted later, we've met 26 Vice Admirals in the series, which is more than, and I've got to get this right, more than all of the Lieutenant Commander's regular commanders, captains, commodores, and rear admirals all combined. There's a lot of them. Vice admirals are generally stationed around the world and given command of the various G bases, such as Vice Admiral Smoker, who is leader of the G5 Marines. But we also do have Vice Admiral Kommel of the G2 Marines, who had this whole subplot about coffee and how it always tastes bad, which was eventually solved when he was sold milk by Moda, and now his coffee tastes good, very good. Although since Emu destroyed the Lucia Kingdom, I'm assuming his coffee has gone back to tasting bad, very bad. But one of the factors that makes Buster Calls so dangerous is because 5 Vice Admirals are assigned to them. On any Slobby, this is where we met Doberman, Strawberry, Onigumu, Yamakaji, and my personal favorite Vice Admiral, Momonga. They're dangerous because Haki is a strict requirement to become a Vice Admiral. They must have a mastery of basic observation and armament. And in retrospect, the Straw Hats were very, very fortunate that they didn't engage with any of them during any Slobby. The most famous Vice Admiral, though, is definitely Monkey D. Garp, who, despite him being arguably the most powerful Marine and its spiritual figurehead, chose to remain as merely a Vice Admiral. Chose, or I suppose choice being the key word here. Because in a way you could say that Vice Admirals have the highest degree of freedom within the Marines. Because becoming a full-on Admiral locks your nuts into a completely new command structure, which we'll get into in a bit. But Vice Admirals are of course next in line to become actual Admirals. For example, Gion and Tokikake were both Admiral candidates during the time skip, also known as Momo Usagi and Chaton, aka Pink Rabbit and Brown Pig. So they were even given preemptive Admiral epithets. So they're sort of like Admirals in waiting, or maybe Shadow Admirals. Yeah, that sounds cooler. Fun fact though, the man in charge of giving epithets is also a Vice Admiral. His name is Nazu Ketagari, and his hobby is fortune telling based entirely on people's names. And his name literally means to want to name someone. But moving on to the pinnacle now, we have the Admiral rank, a position which only 3 individuals at any given time can hold. Garp aside, Vice Admirals are nothing compared to every full Admiral we've ever met. The original 3 being Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akiinu, all 3 of which are code names assigned to them by Nazu Ketagari, their real names being Borsalino, Kuzan, and Sakazuki, which often leads to a lot of very confusing fan discussions, especially with the latter 2 because they aren't admirals anymore, so we don't use their code names anymore, but replacing them with Fujitora and Ryukugyu. 2 very interesting cases because they didn't go through the Marine hierarchy to get here. After the Paramount War, the world government conducted a global draft, and these 2 were seemingly promoted straight to Admiral. Straight from nothing to Admiral, which I guess is a pretty big FU to everyone who has served in the Marines for decades now. But it was necessary, because the emphasis of admirals is raw power. At any given time, these 3 figures are touted as the world government's greatest military might. These 3 people are supposed to command more fear than the hundreds of thousands of other Marines combined. Here's the thing though, due to this powersome reputation, admirals are under the direct command of the world nobles. And if a crime is committed against a world noble, an admiral is immediately sent to enact justice. Such as when Luffy punched St. Charles on Sabari, Admiral Kizaru was immediately sent. Which seems like overkill, but that's the point. Because regular kill, or dare I say even underkill, rarely discourage rebellion. Hence why Garp refused the promotion, because he didn't want to be used that way. But from here, the single highest position one can reach within the Marines is the Fleet Admiral. But also not quite the highest, but also it is. And I'll explain why in a bit. But the Fleet Admiral is a rank assigned to only one person at any given time, and they are responsible for oversight across the entire organization and given sole command during wartime or battle scenarios. The thing about the Fleet Admiral is that, yes, it sounds all fancy and in charge. You'd think that they have a lot of power, but they don't. What generally happens is the 5 Elder Stars make a decision, and then it's the Fleet Admiral's job to make those decisions work. And this is probably why current Fleet Admiral Sakazuki is often so frustrated. He reached what he thought was absolute authority, only to realize that he probably has even less agency than if he just remained an Admiral, or even a Vice Admiral. But, as alluded to before, we can still go one position higher. Above the Fleet Admiral is the World Government Commander-in-Chief. This is the very pinnacle of the hierarchy. The highest military position you can hold in this world. The Commander-in-Chief is responsible for not only overseeing the Marines, but every militaristic force that the world government controls, including Cypherpol. There's only ever one at any given time, and we only know of one at this point, who is Kong, a former Fleet Admiral, a very fascinating guy, and if you want to know more about him, then I would suggest that you definitely watch this video. But that is every rank within the Marines explained by a man on the internet.